Welcome back to the Live Zone Primetime. Another day, another landmark ruling that could change the landscape for how social media companies operate. Tony P, 2 L's in a row for Meta.
Yes, and
This
YouTube
case,
as well.
Yeah, this case comes from California and could mean major changes when it comes to kids and online safety. So the jury ruled that social media is addictive, and that's what we want to talk about a little bit more tonight, this idea of social media addiction. Dr. Eugene Lipov is a biological psychologist and the author of Memes, Brain Disorders, and Other Modern Maladies. He joins us now live. Dr. Eugene, thank you so much for spending some time with us here on the Live Zone Primetime.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so you say that social media is not just psychological, but it's biological. What do you mean by that?
So originally I started looking at it in detail when I started looking at mimetic disease, which is basically a meme. You watch some kind of meme that upsets you, and you keep watching it, and then the algorithm pull you in a similar direction, which gives you a hit of dopamine. And you keep watching that, that gives you psychological issues. But psychological issues actually become biological issues, and that's where I know quite a bit about. What happens there is a couple of things. Number one, amygdala, or fight and flight fear center, activates. That starts to change inflammation in your body, potentially leading to cancer in the future. One. Two, it definitely affects your sleep, because you're still thinking, even if you've turned the device off, you're still thinking about it, and that changes your melatonin. Lack of sleep really affects you badly. All of that combines to have biological effect on your body. In fact, if you watch enough bad stuff, you get PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and the whole body changes. Again, inflammation, your cortisol increases, people gain weight, and they can't move. Now, children are much more vulnerable, and that's where I think part of the debate will be today for discussion.
Doctor, which particular features of social media apps that you're seeing, like the most important ones, that trigger these biological responses and contribute to what people call the addiction or brain rot? Which features in particular really accelerate that and can make some of these impacts almost permanent?
Yeah, so again, in young children, which are immersed from birth, like 16 and younger, the alpha generation, that becomes permanent, I believe, and we can talk about that. But anything short that, if you think about, if you're playing if you're in Vegas and you play gambling, right, or you pull the lever on a slot machine, sometimes it gives you a reward, sometimes it doesn't. It's consistent and it's quick. So TikTok is very fast on and off. There are short segments, and then the algorithms start pulling you in different directions. Those algorithms are designed to keep you playing. The way it does, it gives you hit dopamine on and off, and that's what addiction is. So people who are addicted to gambling cannot stop gambling. Some of them fall over because they stop drinking. This is very similar. That's children are particularly vulnerable to that.
Are there also parts of the apps visually from how they're presented, or things like likes and the interaction comment sections? Do those things also contribute to it as well?
Well, absolutely. And especially women or girls are sensitive to being assessed by others and assessing themselves. So if you're waiting for somebody, you put up a post, and then you're waiting for someone to respond, is it good or bad? You're always waiting, you're always interacting. You're always being continued to pulled in. And then it also, if it's colorful and it's mobile and there's music involved, all of that gets all your senses going, and that pulls you in further and further to the tune of, we're looking about 12, 14-year-old not being able to sleep till 1 or 2 in the morning, and then when they get up, they're pretty useless. It's hard for them to go to sleep, to school, and focus. In fact, we're starting to see higher anxiety rates already in alpha generation. Reading scores are dropping. All of those things are already happening. It's not if it's happening, it is already happening.
Yeah, you mentioned this generation alpha, which obviously is after Gen Z. Why, in your opinion, are they even more susceptible to all of these negative side effects of social media?
There's 3 reasons, actually. The main reason, Gen Z, at least in the beginning of Gen Z, smartphones were really not available widely. Now, Alpha generation have had smartphones since the beginning. So they've been immersed in that for a long time. Now, what the smartphones do is affect sleep significantly. The brain is being formed when you sleep. So if the sleep is affected in alpha generation, their brain cannot form normally, while Gen Z had an opportunity to form the brain and then get addicted later, while alpha generation were born in this already crucible of smartphones. And that's the main issue.
Doctor, some analysts and the social media companies will say, well, part of this is on the parents and, taking the phone out of children's hands to engage more in public, for example, or in real life, as they call it. What would be your response to that case where it's more on the part of the parents to take the phone away versus the features driving said addiction? And at some point, the kids may not even be able to pull themselves away from it.
Well, it's not one or the other. Yeah, I think it's everything.
Okay.
But if you have a phone that's designed to be addictive, it's a much harder thing for a parent to disengage from them, right? So if somebody is given narcotic and they become addicted and the parent says stop taking it, that's a hard thing to do, because then the kids start to fight you. Keep in mind, in China, for example, if you are 15 years old and younger, all the devices got shut off they turn off all the devices by law at 9 p.m. All the devices turn off.
Wow.
No argument, no debate. But you think what happens? Parents don't have to fight it at all. The kids get used to it, they get sleep, their mind forms normally. That's what the alpha generation is done in another country. In our country, yes, I understand the parents should have a certain amount of control, but you may have noticed the parents sometimes don't have that much control. And frankly, a lot of times parents, like I saw a child recently on the street, 1 year old, there's a phone that's attached to the crib so he can watch the phone. So I think part of it is education. I agree with that. But the problem is, if you're going to have a device that is entertainment and whatever, it should not be addictive. I think that's key. And I think that is controllable. That's what the lawsuits are about. And I think there's going to be more and more of them, because the science is pretty clear. They're designed to be addictive. We call it, we want to maintain engagement. Another term for it is addiction.
So, doctor, what's the solution to this? What should these social media companies be? Is there something they should be forced to do to make it less addictive? What would that be? And what is the future look like when it comes to social media? And will it be legislation? Will it be instituting rules like you just mentioned that exist in other countries where it's just not even an option?
Well, in an ideal environment, I think legislation would be very helpful. Because it's much easier if everybody's phone turns off who is 10 years old at a certain time, there's no argument. I think that would make life much easier for the parents and long-term for the child. They might not like it at the time, but long-term, our job as adults is protect the children. I think that's number one. I'm not techy enough to understand algorithmic design, but I'm sure there's a way to minimize this. And also the whole movement of bricking, which I've talked about in the past, turn off the color so that the phone, maybe we can turn off the color for X amount of time. And the other part is I highly recommend adults as well as children to minimize the amount of exposure. So let's say social media 1 hour per day, and that's it, as opposed to sitting there and scrolling endlessly. Because we know it's a vulnerability, especially in the small children. We know if you turn the color off, they're not as addicted. We know if you can set a feature, adult control feature, that says you can only use the phone from here to here. Worst case scenario, take the phone away, give a flip phone to the child, and have true control of the phone. I think that's the way forward. But legislation would be extremely helpful.
Now, when looking at this case, Doctor, there was two companies. Of course, you had Google and YouTube, which is all one company, and you had Meta. And YouTube, in their comments today, said there's a misunderstanding of what YouTube is. And there are some distinct differences. There's a more short-form content you see on an Instagram or a TikTok versus longer-form shows like this and other longer-form podcasts, for example. Do you think there's any distinct differences in short form platforms like a Meta, Instagram, all of that versus YouTube? Or is the through line to addiction the same exact thing from the algorithm to how it's presented?
I think no. I believe Meta or Facebook and Instagram are more addictive. It's just because it's moved much faster, and also TikTok, I think it's much more addictive. But they've been starting looking at that. However, if you look at YouTube, short form under a minute is similar. It's not as interactive, however, because if you look at the social engagement, YouTube is more passive. So from my perspective, it's less addictive. However, when you do Facebook, especially women, especially Gen Z women have been studied in great detail now. They're clearly much more addictive because biologically, women look for social interaction and content and response. So when they put up something and they're waiting for the response, that's what produces attention. That's what sucks them in on a continuous basis. And it affects their mood long term.
So it seems to me that one of the major items that could be addressed here is just the speed and velocity of how people are viewing content, basically an attention span issue, right, doctor?
Well, I think that's part of it. That part, what is the content? Is that cute? Is that a cute little kitten you're looking at, or you're looking at explosions and shooters, right? So the huge part of it is not just screen time. Screen time is only part of the angle. When do you watch it? The phone should be out of the bedroom. Everybody, adults, children, but especially children, before 9 p.m. That's huge. Sleep is restorative. It helps your brain function normally. And generation alpha truly is building the brain. And if you're scrolling when you're 12 years old, you're damaging your brain. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
So when, how long, and what is the content?
Got it.
All right, Dr. Eugene Lipov, thank you so much for spending some time with us here on the Live Zone Primetime and lending us your expertise on the matter.
Thank you, doctor.